With the continuing backdrop of global recession, the atmosphere at Frieze 2009 was decidedly optimistic. Some galleries were apprehensive before the doors opened. Nevertheless, many reported a healthy mixture of strong sales and serious interest, in stark contrast to last year.
I think this year is better than last year. I think that London was a bit in shock last year, and I found it, compared to the year before, the differential was quite huge. I think that this is better than it was last year.
Yesterday it was very active and almost felt that it was a kind of a turnaround, from last year's atmosphere, which was really down. And I think you could really feel, it was much more active, many questions. We did some very good sales and we had a lot of interest.
It's been going surprisingly well. There's a real energy that returned to the fair as opposed to the previous year. You really feel it. There's a lot of optimism and a lot of people coming back, and the collectors are definitely back this year, which is a huge change from last year.
So far it's a 50-50 situation because we are really happy with the attention we got internationally, really working well. We just need to locate one or two more sales and then we are extremely happy. So far we are happy.
Frieze has found itself competing with many satellite fairs, showcasing smaller galleries touting the next big thing. Perhaps in response to this and the changing financial climate, the fair organisers this year created Frame, a new area dedicated to galleries which have been operating for less than 6 years. 29 galleries exhibited in this section, despite the limitation of featuring a single artist. Ancient and Modern took the challenge a stage further, displaying an installation by Alan Kane, which was not for sale. Instead, the gallery gave away free postcards of the piece.
The idea, it's sort of been around in my head for a little while because it sort of dawned on me that my mum had a sensibility. I could see that there was a strong personality in the stuff that she had around the house, not just the fact that it was important to her, but that there had been, an artistic sensibility involved in its accumulating, and that sort of led me to thinking, as with many of my projects, that there's an equivalence between what a lot of people do and the things that just a few people do. There are direct relationships, and I tend to enjoy highlighting the connections and relationships between activities which on the surface, on the face of it, might seem kind of disparate. I think it's quite fascinating actually because all my work's gone into designing the system of displaying it. So all my thoughts and energies have been about how to make sure that the pieces come across strongly and with consideration. And I had this sort of overview and this idea of how it was all going to be when it was displayed, and the fact that it was going to make a bit of a counterpoint to the whole Frieze experience, something slightly more modest in the face of all these grand gestures. And then when we actually, at the very last minute, because most of our work was preparation, when we actually laid the things out, I was slightly stunned at how I was jerked back into my parents' life rather than doing what I was imagining would happen, which is jerking her into the art fair, So it's quite interesting. The materials got some energy, got some power that I hadn't really taken due consideration of.
Scattered around the corners of the fair, this year's Frieze projects continued to provide a contrast to the more than 150 galleries showing this year. Visitors were greeted by the first of these in the form of Ryan Gander's We Are Constant, created in his almost instant photo studio, where he printed portraits of visitors looking at an artwork of their choice, hanging copies of the images to form the work. Meanwhile, Stephanie Sihuko employed a team of artists to provide a solution to the more financially challenged collector by producing bootleg copies of the works on display.
When Neville Wakefield, the curator, contacted me for a proposal, he was really looking for artworks that could exist within the context of the art fair, but challenge notions of the kind of commerce or, the very structure in which we would expect to find things within a fair. So immediately what popped into my head was this idea of coming up with a kind of alternative exchange or a kind of negotiated transaction of art and buyer. I think it's really the dialogue around this piece that's the most important to me. I mean, it's not about the sales, and it's not about the, this idea of counterfeiting as a dangerous or negative thing, but it's to spark a conversation within the context of the art fair. I have had one person almost or trying to make the decision between buying the original and buying the copy, and in the end they never came back for the copy, so I assume they went for the original, which is perfect. That's exactly what they should do if they want the original.
For those hoping to get a glimpse of the future, artist Bob and Roberta Smith was on hand, so to speak, giving palm readings to determine potential prospects in the art world.
Actually, it's a foil to talk to people and also to make a drawing of their hand. And hands are incredibly beautiful things. And to sit and talk to somebody and look at their hand and make as precise a drawing of it as I can, I think is a very beautiful thing to do. So it's actually sort of about that more than it is about the palm reading, but then I do talk to them about my reading of my drawing of their hand in a way which is to do with psychology. The truth of it is that I tell people as I read through their palms that actually if they're more forthright and they develop their skills of being perhaps a bit more self-centered, but certainly more forthright, then that will help them to achieve these kind. And actually, the truth about this is that anybody could have a show at the Museum of Modern Art if they believe that they can have it. So basically, what I'm doing is telling people that it's a possibility, you know.
For those needing a break from the hustle and bustle of the main fair, the Sculpture Park remained a great place to relax and appreciate works in an alternative environment. Louise Bourgeois' work, The Couple 2003, is the largest in a series of hanging aluminium sculptures by the artist, and caused some logistical issues when choosing its location for display, since its weight meant there was only one tree in the park capable of supporting it. Graham Hudson's Edward VIII 2009 represents the only statue or commemoration of the monarch in England, while Remy Makrovich's Bonsai Potato 2001-2009 broadcast a reading of Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe to anyone who happened to be nearby.
This is how the Sculpture Park should be, in my view. It's full of people. There's a crowd around the Louise Bourgeois looking up at it, taking photographs of it. People are discussing these works. I think this is really, because the Sculpture Park is for the park public as much as it is for the art public. And it's the one aspect of the Frieze Art Fair that really is open to everybody, which is one of the reasons that I enjoy doing it so much. And it's an introduction to contemporary art, contemporary sculpture, for all sorts of people who otherwise wouldn't possibly come into contact with it. What we try and do is present a cross-section of sculpture in the open air at any given moment, as well as trying to provide examples of work from across the world. So we've got one artist from China here, one artist from India, and so on. So it's not just the Western world that's being represented.
A year on from the uncertainty following the Lehman Brothers collapse just before the last Frieze Fair, the global financial landscape is very different, and perhaps expectations had been curbed as a result. However, this year's Frieze was regarded by most as a success in terms of sales, even if the prices were considerably lower than those of the pre-crash world. It may be some time, if ever, before we return to those hedonistic days, but if nothing else, the global financial crisis has made everyone try that little bit harder, with the end result being a note of cautious optimism in the air.